3D anime, a controversial subgenre of the medium to say the least. Some people get pissed off just at the mere sight of CG within anime, others brush it off as laziness, and some perceive it as a necessity with times changing and technological improvement. Personally, I never really liked fully CG or 3D anime, but having seen quite a few, unfortunately, over my time watching all sorts of shows and movies. Movies like Hello World, abominations to the genre like the anime adaptation of Berserk and Crunchyroll's X-Arm, to the rare masterpieces within the subgenre like Land of the Lustrous, I can say I've subjected myself to quite a few CG anime titles for better or for worse over the years. A couple months back when I saw the Trigun Stampede trailer drop for the first time, I can't say I was too stoked to watch it. It was immediately apparent that it was going to be a CG anime, and a reboot of a series no less, so at the time I could already imagine the comment section of the trailer going insane. Having said that, I've never seen the original 1998 Trigun, but based off general sentiment online and many recommendations from friends over the years, I've always known Trigun to have quite a unique cult following. Be it coincidence, I just so happened to finish both seasons of Blood Blockade Battlefront over the course of a couple months, which was a series also by the creator of Trigun, and I found it decently enjoyable, so I wasn't opposed to the idea of watching Trigun Stampede as a filler show for my downtime. Against the obvious go watch the original, it's so much better, and the typical I hate CG anime comments, I decided to watch Trigun Stampede anyway. And, well, I think it's actually pretty good, for what it is at least. I'm going to preface this before I get into anything detailed. I just want to reiterate again that I have not seen the original Trigun, nor have I read the manga. Based off my understanding of how Trigun Stampede fits into the whole Trigun world, it's sort of a completely new adaptation of the series that makes a few changes to the story and characters to present a similar story but with a new direction. So my ramblings about Trigun Stampede are just going to be about Trigun Stampede. That's it. Not the franchise as a whole, but just Trigun Stampede. Also, light spoilers, I think, but based on stuff I've read, Trigun Stampede kind of spoils the main mystery of the original show pretty early, so make of that what you will. A basic synopsis first. Trigun Stampede follows the activities of Meryl Streep and Robert De Niro, two journalists looking for the infamous outlaw Vash the Stampede on a planet called No Man's Land. There, the two journalists end up meeting Vash and a colorful cast of characters, where they uncover mysteries about the planet and Vash's past, as well as confronting the main antagonist of the show, Vash's brother Million's Knives. The plot is definitely nothing to write home about. It serves its purpose pretty well just by driving the narrative forward in a pretty linear fashion without any unexpected twists and turns. The confrontations and conflicts the crew of people get into aren't anything too groundbreaking in this day and age, but still is far from being bad as some reviews I've seen it make it out to be. I think leaving it at the level of just okay seems about right to me personally. To the average audience member watching this show to pass the time, I think it's quite sufficient. That being said, a plot like that is definitely not going to get most people through the whole show. But what makes Trigun Stampede stand out and move past the typical barriers of actually finishing the show are the characters. Personally, I found Vash, although a bit frustrating at times, still an enjoyable character to watch deal with situations. His motivation as being a pacifist forces him to solve a lot of conflicts in relatively unique ways, putting a contrast on characters such as the cynical Robert and the cold-blooded assassin Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Onto the antagonists, I thought the characterization of Million's Knives was actually executed extremely well. All the scenes with him in it had great direction and cinematography, really giving off his menacing vibe and his evilness, for a lack of a better word. That stuff aside, there actually isn't really much to it. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this show is going to go down in history as some masterpiece of anime that everyone deserves to watch. Because frankly it isn't, and it probably never will be. But the reason I'm making this video after watching Trigun Stampede is that I got the feeling that I usually don't get when I watch typically or traditionally shows that I think are mid. I thought that Trigun Stampede was actually a pretty fun watch, and I found myself being able to easily recommend it to friends who were looking for something to watch while eating or taking a break from their catalog of films or shows. And the weirdest thing of all was that I think I attribute it all to the fact that it was animated with CG. I think where a lot of CG anime fail is that aspects of the show just don't feel like they fit. More often than not, CG characters feel expressionless and cheap, like a cutscene from a bad or cheaply made video game that goes on for way too long. A benefit of 2D animation in anime that CG anime can't really ever replicate is that the shows can get away with literally showing you still images. My guess is that we expect CG anime to be more expressive, more fluid, and more real based off just the fact that it's 3D, because of things like Pixar and Disney CG animated films that create characters that feel alive incredibly well. The art and direction has to be incredibly consistent in CG anime, or else stuff sticks out like a sore thumb visually, and it's incredibly frustrating and distracting, which is where a lot of CG anime fail. But one key aspect as to why Land of the Lustrous was such a beloved anime adaptation despite being totally CG, of course aside from the source material being really good, I think is that everything seemed consistent. Everything looked like it was supposed to be there, and a lot of the time you'd forget you were watching a CG anime because how everything fit together. Similarly, I think Trigun Stampede hits that same balance of having art direction with enough thought and care put into it that everything blends together almost perfectly. Sure, frame peeping throughout the show will definitely yield some imperfections, but arguably I think that's not why people would go and watch Trigun Stampede in the first place. Many of the action sequences work really fluidly and well with the CG style, and the characters in the show are surprisingly expressive throughout conversations, which kept me engaged as opposed to looking at unchanging faces throughout the whole thing. I was genuinely surprised at how few times I caught myself being actively and consciously aware that this was a CG animation instead of traditional 2D animation, and thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the sequences solely because they were CG, especially with the various encounters with Million's knives. Sure, one could argue that everything would have looked visually better with 2D, and I totally get that sentiment, but I think that feeling of fun that came from watching Trigun Stampede would have been lost if it was 2D. In a way, as weird as it sounds, I think the preconceived ideas and expectations of what a CG anime is like really ended up making Trigun Stampede a fun watch. In the incredibly niche and frankly quite weird genre of CG anime that are available, I think Trigun Stampede deserves to stand out as one of the better ones. One of the greats, even. Looking at Trigun Stampede from that perspective, I think I was able to appreciate the show a lot more for what it is. Truly, I do think that Trigun Stampede is a masterclass in 3D anime. Is Trigun Stampede perfect? Hardly. Would Trigun Stampede have a remote chance of being recommended to a new anime fan who hasn't seen that much stuff before? Definitely not. But if you're out there just wanting to watch something to pass the time, something to kick back and relax with, or if you're tired of the usual seasonal slop, Trigun Stampede is not a bad shout. It might not be the action-packed spectacle that is your flagship shonen hit, and it might not be the deep, introspective, and thought-provoking show you would want to sit down and watch seriously. And if you're turned off by that already, I completely get it. To a very large extent, I'm also that kind of person. I think a lot of the time in the anime community, we get caught up in the dichotomy of what is peak and what is garbage when expressing an opinion on something really easily, forcing the idea that you should only comment on or watch stuff that's universally deemed as popular or good, or have some insane hot take that makes an entire fan base's blood boil, all while dismissing everything else as mid. Trigun Stampede will probably never be in any of those conversations, and quite frankly will probably always be negatively compared to the original 1998 anime and the source material. But what I can say is that Trigun Stampede was undeniably a fun watch, and sometimes when we get lost in the spectacle of the modern state of anime, I think we forget that maybe, just maybe, that's all a show really needs to be.